What's going on, friends? It is no secret that camshafts are some of the best horsepower per dollar that you can put into any Harley-Davidson motorcycle. But there's a little trick to selecting cams. So today, guys, I want to share with you some tips to help you get the right cam for the way you ride, and not only for the way you ride, but the right cam that's designed for your particular model of Harley-Davidson. So guys, the weather's warming up, and right now is not exactly the best time to be tearing down your motorcycle and getting a new cam installed in it. But while you're out riding and enjoying your bike this summer, it is a perfect time to think about what kind of camshaft you want to put in your bike. And there's a lot of tips out there on getting the right camshaft, because also you don't want to have to go back and buy parts twice going down the road. So selecting the right camshaft now, that's going to match with what your plans for future updates on your engine are later, is going to be critical, or else you're going to be rebuying another camshaft. But before we get into all the tips on selecting the right camshaft, please be sure to hit that like button if you enjoyed the video, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. So if you guys have watched my videos on the Sportster cams, on the EVO, the Twin Cam, and even the Milwaukee 8, when it comes to selecting a camshaft, the number one thing you want to pay attention to is the RPM range that you're riding in. And we've gotten a lot of comments on this about, which camshaft should I go with? Well, number one basic thing to decide is what your RPM range is. The other thing you want to consider is, do I ride 2-up? How often do I ride 2-up? And how much luggage and load do I put on my motorcycle? So by first determining our RPM range, that really narrows down the type of cam we're looking for. If you're looking for something that is low end to mid-range, which is typically the area where most people on a Harley are going to ride. Now, unless you have a Dyna, then you might tend to ride more in the upper mid-range to higher RPM range, and that's okay. There's a cam out there for you when it comes to that. So when you're riding this summer, really pay attention to that RPM range that you're riding in. Now, the next important factor to look at is, am I riding 2-up? Do I carry a lot of luggage? If you're riding 2-up or carrying a lot of luggage, you might necessarily not want to go for a cam that is geared more towards the higher RPM range. You would want something that's geared more toward low to mid range. That's going to give you torque off the line and help pull your bike down the highway while you're also carrying the weight of 2 people plus luggage. Now, when it comes to all these tips, these are applicable to any Harley-Davidson, no matter what you're riding, whether it's a Sportster, a Dyna, a Softail, or a touring model. Now, the other important thing to note when it comes to cam selection is making sure that you get a cam that is going to work with your future upgrades. Now, I will caution you that most bolt-in cams generally are designed around stock compression. They're designed around stock compression. That way you can put these cams directly into the motorcycle without having to change your valve springs, and they're going to work with your bike with its lower factory compression. Now, granted, a lot of bolt-in cams, they will work with compression up to 10-to-1. So if you're riding a twin cam, which they generally have lower compression, and you're looking at a big bore kit later on down the road, you could go ahead and buy one of these bolt-in cams, but just bear in mind that you say you'd have to keep your compression under 10-to-1. Now, if your future plans do include a big bore kit, but you want to go with higher compression, when you're getting a camshaft, it would be worth your while to go ahead and get one that is maybe a little higher lift. Yes, you're probably going to have to spend some extra money and change your valve springs out. Yes, the heads are going to have to come off. Yes, that would be an opportune time to do the big bore kit, but it's really unavoidable if you're building in stages and not doing it all at once. But by doing so, when you put the bike back together, you've already got your valve springs in there, you've got your higher lift cam, but just make sure that higher lift cam is going to work with the factory compression that's in it now. So this way, you'll be able to go ahead and upgrade, get a higher compression big bore kit, make more power, and you're already ready to go, and you don't have to buy another camshaft. Now, where you can run into trouble with picking out a camshaft is if you buy one that's designed mainly around the low compression, and then later on you don't think about your cam, and you go out and you buy a big bore kit that's a high compression kit, and then all of a sudden you realize, oh crap, this isn't going to work with the camshaft that I bought. So then you run into a situation where you have to buy another cam to make it work with your big bore kit. Because generally you might get lucky and you might be able to return it, just keep your cam, but at that point you're already that far in. you might as well buy another cam and go ahead and swap it out. Now when it comes to camshafts on Sportsters, this isn't so much on the big twins, but on the Sportster engines, a lot of the camshafts out there, they tend to rob one area or another. So say, to get more horsepower out of a Sportster with a cam swap, generally you're going to sacrifice some of your low to mid range to get more horsepower on top. And to get more horsepower on top in a Sportster, you're generally having to rev that Sportster out to about 7,000 RPM. So I would mind you be careful when it comes to picking out Sportster cams. I have videos on Sportster cams as well. They'll kind of show you what a stock baseline horsepower and torque is. But if you look carefully at some of these graphs, you will notice that there is a drop in horsepower with some of the higher lift cams down in the low to mid range. But you pick it up on top. Now, this isn't so much the case with the big twins, because big twins are just like tractor motors. You give them more lift and duration, they're going to automatically produce more horsepower and torque with proper tuning. Now, one other important factor with cam selection is making sure you get the right cam for the right motorcycle. Now, I'm not talking about buying a cam for an 88 because it's not going to fit in a 96 or a 103. What I'm talking about is if you buy a cam for, say, a 103, this cam might be designed more towards a touring motorcycle. Because a lot of these cams, if you look at the manufacturer's recommendations on what you're installing them in, generally they're going to say this is made for lighter bikes, or this cam is better suited for a heavier motorcycle. What they're getting at there is if you buy a cam that's suited for a heavier motorcycle and you ride a Dyna or a Softail and you ride it pretty hard, if you put that cam in your bike, yeah, you're going to have massive low-end torque and mid-range, but that cam's going to run out real quick. It's going to drop off on you, and you're not going to have that higher RPM horsepower and torque that you were looking for. So, for example, like in the Dynas, the S&S 585 is an excellent cam. That cam doesn't sacrifice any low-end or mid-range. It actually gains low and mid-range, and then it runs out higher on the top end in the higher RPM range. But now say, like with the Wood cams, the two cams I like from Wood are the TW222 and 555. Now, they're both very high horsepower producing cams. High horsepower, high torque. And they do this throughout the RPM range. Now, with the 222, this cam is generally more geared towards touring bikes or heavy motorcycles. So say if you ride a Softail, but you ride it 2-up, and you carry some luggage on it, you might be more interested in a 222. Now the 555 runs out higher than the 222. So the 555 is a little more geared towards somebody that's got a Dyna, that wants some low and mid range, but still wants to retain their high RPM horsepower and torque. And these same principles, guys, can be applied to any Harley-Davidson motor. Like on the EVO, two cams that I really like on the EVO engine are from Andrews EV23 and EV27. EV27, great cam for touring motorcycles. Excellent. If you have a touring motorcycle with an EVO in it, EV27, in my opinion, is the way to go. But say if you have a Dyna or a Softail that's powered by an EVO engine, I tend to more lean towards the EV23. The EV23 is kind of more of a mid-range to upper RPM cam. And generally, most guys that ride Dynas or Softails, that's more the RPM range that they're going to want to ride in, is the mid to high. But guys, that's just a couple of tips that I've had floating around in my head, because I get a lot of questions of what cam's right for my bike. Because we can look at dyno graphs and charts all day long and see what kind of horsepower they produce, and they will do that with any motor that they're specified for. The only difference is making sure you get the right cam in the right bike for the right RPM range that you like to ride in. It's something that's really not all that tricky, but it can be really tricky because a lot of manufacturers, sometimes they're not very forthcoming with what these cams are actually going to do and what motorcycles and what they're designed for. Now, Wood and S&S are pretty good about kind of giving you some insight into generally what kind of motorcycle you want to put these cams in. So guys, if you're in the market for a new cam and you're out riding this summer, because as I mentioned, like right now is not the time you really want to be tearing down your bike because the weather's warming up, we're all getting out and riding. But while you're out and riding, just pay attention to your RPM range and what kind of loads you're carrying on the motorcycle. This will help you out tremendously when you go to pick a camshaft. And that's kind of what they mean by the difference, where obviously heavier bikes, more of the touring models, and lighter bikes are referring to more of the Dyna models. And as I mentioned, guys, when it comes to Sportsters, pay attention to any dyno graphs that you can find out there, and make sure you're not completely killing the bottom end in the mid-range and putting all that horsepower on top, unless that's exactly where you want to ride. Because on the Sportster, the W cam that comes in the later models, that is just a perfect mix of low, mid-range, and top end. But anyhow, guys, that's all I've got for you this week. If you enjoyed the video, please don't forget to give it a big thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. But until next week, guys, y'all get out, enjoy this nice warm weather, stay safe, dodge the cars, and I'll catch you guys in next week's video. Thanks for watching.